Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast with Elizabeth Chappell, where every week we dive into how you can turn your craft into a successful career. Get ready to have the career you've always dreamed of.
Welcome to episode 93 of the Craft to Career podcast. I am getting excited because we're getting close to the 100th episode. On the 95th episode, I'm going to announce how I'm going to celebrate. I haven't decided yet, frankly, which is why I'm not announcing yet. So I'm giving myself a couple of weeks to figure that out. I am so excited. So we will think of something and announce something. So keep an eye out for episode 95 because I'm going to be brainstorming some kind of fun celebration for the 100th episode. This week on the podcast, I have Laura Perry of Global Fiber Shop, and it is so fun to have her on the podcast. I really love meeting you listeners in all the different ways. This is definitely a first for me in how I met this guest for the podcast. And I'm really glad that we met and that our paths crossed. So another plug for just taking the opportunity to be in the room with someone when you get a chance. So you'll have to hear Laura's side of what happened and how we met and how she ended up being on the podcast. And like I said, I'm so glad that she is, because she is just a very talented woman and is running a very successful business. So there is a lot for you to learn from Laura. She runs an online fabric shop. And if you go to the show notes, it's www.quilterscandy.com/93. You will see photos of Laura and also her workspace, which is beautiful. When we were chatting, I was saying, oh, our listeners, they can't see you, but that fabric behind you is so beautiful. And then she also shares a photo of how she cuts fabric, this table that her husband made for her that is such a time saver and it's genius. And Laura, I think you're going to have a lot of people reaching out to your husband being like, how did you make this? Because it just looks amazing. So let's dive in. Let me introduce you to Laura and let's get started. All right, Laura, thank you so much for being here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For our listeners, can you share who you are in the quilting world and what you do?
My name is Laura Perry, and I own Global Fiber Shop, which is an online quilt shop, online textile store.
And where are you located?
I am located, as you can see, I know your listeners can't see, in my home, in my home studio, and we're in Massachusetts.
Okay. Very cool. So we'll dive into more details, but before we do, I just want to share with the listeners how this came about. Why are you on the podcast? Do you want to share the story?
Sure. Well, they say showing up is half the battle, right? So I attended my first quilt market this past October, and I was posting that I was there and realized that someone else I had collaborated with recently was also there. So we made arrangements to meet up. And she said, oh, I'm going to go over to Elizabeth's book signing. And I didn't even realize you were there until that moment. And I'm like, oh, I'll tag along too. I think that we were probably an hour early or so. You guys were still...
Oh, were you?
You were all still setting up and very graciously gave us the numbers that we could come back and see you. I was so thrilled to get to meet you in person.
Awesome. So this was your first quilt market ever? First
quilt market ever.
And how come you decided to go?
One of the things I opened my shop, it was, I'm approaching 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in March. So I believe this year was the first quilt market they had in a couple of years because of COVID. And they have a series before the actual market officially opens called the Schoolhouse Series. And that piqued my interest. As a new shop owner, I'm here to learn all the things.
So did you learn things? I am curious which schoolhouse things you went to and what did you love,
Yeah, I did. I feel like I learned something new about the industry on a daily basis. So which I love. That's where I'm at my best, is when I'm sort of researching and digging into all the things. And I did learn a lot. I attended a lot of sessions about Google and how to optimize my website for Google searches. And I
Who taught
walked
that?
away actually feeling a little bit better about what I was doing, feeling
Oh,
like, all right,
good, good.
I'm on the right track. There's certainly lots of work to do, but I'm on the right track.
So, okay, you came. Who did you meet up with too that you had met before and collaborated with?
Jessica Elliston, she was a pattern tester for Wellspring Designs, and I had just
Oh,
worked with them on the Sundance quilt, one of her new quilt
oh
patterns.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I love Casey. She's a good friend of
wonderful.
mine. That is so cool. So, okay, then you came in line for the book
Yeah,
signing, and when it was your turn, you said, I'll let you say in your
I'm
own
sure I was
words.
all like clumsy.
No, you weren't. It was so fun to meet people and
I just mentioned that I had been listening to the podcast, and you have been a wonderful resource again because I'm here to learn everything I can about how to serve the customers better and just how this industry works. Um, and I had mentioned that I'm a fan of the podcast, and you asked who I was and what I do, and here we are.
and did I feel like I was the one who was like, "Oh, we should have." How did that? I don't even remember now. My gosh, speaking of being clumsy, how did that conversation go? Was I like, "Oh, we
I
haven't
think
had."
it was brief in the moment. I mean, you got a line of people, so but you were so kind, and I just mentioned my name and the name of my shop, and I think the shop may have registered, and you said, oh, I would really be interested to talk to somebody who owns a textile shop, a fabric shop. So
Yeah.
you asked me to send you an email and reach out, and I did.
Which you are so nice. As anyone who listens to the podcast knows, emails are my kryptonite. It's just not my skill set. I have someone in there helping.
I
But
get it.
I think you were pretty patient because I think as it does, it takes me a while to get back to people. So thank you for being patient as I'm like, oh yeah, now, how about now? So
I
thank
get
you.
it completely.
Yeah. So yeah, I do a lot of education,
Hmm.
memberships. There are a lot of people in the quilting community, quilterpreneurs who are very curious about selling fabric, kits, all the things. So I just love to hear your journey. How did you decide to open
Yeah.
up a shop online?
Uh, So, like many other people who probably are sitting in front of you at the moment who are newer to the industry, it was a COVID pivot, which
Mm-hmm.
um, I feel nothing but gratitude for my experience, and I have to acknowledge the privilege that I had going into this, because opening up a fabric shop means again, you can see the quantity of inventory behind me. It's an investment. And that's not something
Yeah.
that I think that I could have done if I hadn't already had. I'm far enough in my life and career that I could invest in that. So that's the
Yeah.
one cautionary tale I would say to people is you need to. It does. I'm not a gambler, and sometimes it feels a little bit like gambling when you're buying a new collection and you're wondering, is this going
Oh
to?
yeah.
I love it, but is this going to be something that other people like as well? And so you have to be able to stomach a little bit of that. But my journey, this is a total pivot. I was in international education before this, so totally different.
I did not know that. What does that look like? What did you do exactly?
I worked for a private school, and I was the director of their international education program. So I would work with the international students that would come and stay and go to school here in the United States.
So what grade levels?
These are high school.
How many people are coming from international? This is very interesting. I've not heard of such a
Yeah,
thing.
we could have a whole conversation about that. It's huge. It's a huge industry. The school that I was at,
Really?
I had at the peak, I think I had about 40 students.
Why? Why are they coming? I mean, you're in Massachusetts. It's near like Harvard and stuff.
Well, right, that's the dream for so many of them.
Yep.
Um, some of them would come for a year, like any kind of student abroad exchange. I had a lot of students from Asian countries, and they came because their end goal was to go to college in the United States, and they saw this as a way to help increase their application and improve their English.
Well, that's fascinating. I could dive down a rabbit's hole with that. I'm very intrigued all of a sudden.
We could totally go down a rabbit's hole for that, right? Um, I did that for 10 years or so. Loved it. I also got to take students abroad, which was like American students abroad, which
Oh,
was
how
a wonderful.
fun. Where did you go? And then I'll shut up and we can move on. But
I think the best one was Italy.
how
Got to
cool.
take students to Italy for a couple weeks. I think that was the year right before COVID.
Okay, perfect
So,
timing.
and I had already made the decision that I was going to pivot. I was just ready to move on and do another thing. But COVID definitely, nobody was coming after COVID. So the school I was working for was already was going to close because
Oh,
of
wow.
COVID.
Okay.
And so it's okay. Like I said, I had already decided I wanted to pivot, but it gave me the time that I needed to figure out exactly what this next thing was going to be. And I had always been a hobbyist fiber artist, I would say. I think I was like third or fourth grade when my friend taught me to cross stitch and it stuck. And I was doing that and knitting. And I didn't learn to sew until I was pregnant with my son. So that was about 15 years ago. But that's always been a big part of my life. And I didn't know that that could be a career or a thing that people could actually do. And maybe, in my defense, maybe it wasn't 15 years ago. This
Yeah,
may
I
have
wonder.
been more of an evolution now where I can sit here and do what I'm doing. I don't know that the resources, the technology was there to support someone like me doing what I'm doing 15 years ago.
Yeah, with online shops. Because I mean, there have been fabric designers and quilt pattern. And I'm very curious how the evolution, but I will say, I think in the last 5 to 10 years with social media,
Right.
blogs, YouTube, it's totally changed the
It's
trajectory
been
of
a game
this.
changer
Yeah.
because I'm a person that likes to follow a pattern. I like to follow a
Yeah. Okay.
recipe, and I would undercut myself, and I'm not a creative person. That's what I would tell myself. That was I'm not a great I'm not great at drawing. So I'm not an artist in that way. So how would I ever have a career as a pattern designer or something like that? And I now know that there are other skills involved that I do have that I can
So what
leverage.
skills do you have that you feel like, oh, I can bring this to the table?
Well, I do. I'm a little bit of a fabric nerd, and I love color and texture. And I love playing with I can see the patterns and the colors and know how to bring them together.
Good for you for recognizing that.
It's I think that's also been a bit of an evolution for me too, but uh, I think I'm good at it.
Yeah, good for you. I love it. I love that you say that.
Yeah, I have customers who keep coming back to me and say I love these bundles that you're putting together, and I have lots of custom requests. But if I think there's a segment of people out there who have the sewing skills and the ability to to put these quilts together, but maybe are intimidated to choose the fabrics.
It's very fascinating because there are so many different aspects of quilting that can lend itself to a career. Some people love teaching the piecing, some people love writing the pattern, some people ticketing, you the fabric. I like teaching people how to make a career in this, you know? I mean, there's so many different venues and I am just so happy to hear you vocalize this is something I'm good at. We as females in particular are so
Mm.
shy of saying that or like, oh, that's so conceited. It is not. Like, let's own it. I love, love, love hearing you say that. So thank you. So now the itty bitty details of it. When
Sure.
you started, well, first of all, oh, I have so many questions. First of all, let's ask this. Has it been profitable? Do you have a profit?
Okay. So the short answer is yes, I do, and it's a modest profit, which that's where I'm at now. I'm in that stage of how do I scale this and
Mm-hmm.
what is that going to look like? It was an experiment. It was something that my husband and I had talked about. I'd like to try and do this thing. Let's see if it's even going to work. I had zero experience in online retail, in the
Right.
fabric industry. I truly did not know what I was doing when I started. So I wasn't sure if this was going to work or not, but I had an idea of what I wanted to try and do. And I'm happy to say it grew way faster than I anticipated that it would. And so I am profitable. But I'm at that point now where I need help.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
need help to keep up. And so I need to think through, and that's a lot of what this year is going to be, what that looks like.
So, okay, you've been doing it for 2 years, you said?
It'll be 2 years in March.
Was it profitable the first year? Because
No,
let's talk about revenue and profit. You're going to have a lot of revenue because you're
sure,
selling, but then you have to put money back into it. So the
absolutely.
profit, you know, so the first year,
Nope, no
not a
profit,
profitable.
but I was covering expenses.
Okay, well, so you weren't in the red.
No, I wasn't in the red. And
That's good.
I would say it took a full year to get to the point where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm breaking even. I'm
Nice.
covering expenses and still able to reinvest in the business.
Because it usually takes about 2 years
Right,
to like start earning a profit. So that's above average. So profitable. And then let's also talk about the logistics of the time and the space.
right.
I'll hear from you about that.
Okay, so for time, it is all consuming. It is time consuming. And I love it. So,
Yes, good.
so the job that I had in the past was also very time consuming, but, and I loved what I did, but I'm also at the service of everyone but myself, if that kind of makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh yeah.
So with this, there's nothing but a labor of love here. Everything I'm doing because I'm wholeheartedly interested in it. And it's been wonderful. And I'm also right here in my home. So I'm going to run down in about an hour and go pick my son up from school. And I have that kind of flexibility. If anything, I struggle like everyone who works from home, no matter what it is you're doing, with the balance, right? Because it's not an 8 to 5 job. It's the
Right.
first thing I do. It's the last thing I do every day. And it's always on my
Have you
mind.
kept a time log?
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you know how many hours you
I don't
work
want
a day or a
to
week?
know
I know, right? I don't want to know,
how many hours.
but
I don't. I mean, so in terms of filling orders, I I try, and I have the expectation set out there, but it's a Monday through Friday deal. And so
okay.
when I have my shipping times out there, and I say 5 to 7 business days, which is where I'm at right now, that's Monday through
Mm-hmm.
Friday. The reality is, I end up working Sunday nights or Saturday mornings or whatever. But that's the standard, and I would love to be faster right now than that. But again, I need help.
Yeah. I'm curious if you offer by the yard or if everything's for your sanity, if it's like I only offer these sizes or what does that look like for you?
Right now, I'm cutting fat quarters. So I don't know if you can see behind me.
Mm-hmm.
I know that your listeners can't, but when I started off, I would literally had the cutting mat and the rotary cutter, and I was like hand cutting the fat
Mm-hmm.
quarters. And around the holiday season, my husband walked in. He's like, No, this is not going to
Yeah, this
work."
can't keep going. Yeah.
And he's an engineer, and that's how his mind works. He's like, "We need to sort this out. You're going to lose your mind." I'm like, I'm already losing my mind.
I'm done. It's too late. Yeah.
So he made me this proper cutting table with the trowel thing that goes through it, and I use electric scissors, so it's doubled what I can cut. But I do bundles. So I do fat quarter bundles, and I do increments of a quarter yard. So I won't, if someone says 3/8 of a yard, I ask them to round up. That's to protect my sanity and for
Yes.
inventory management.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I have so many questions. First of all, do you mind taking a few photos of this area that I'm
Sure,
seeing and the
sure,
table, and we can put it on the show
absolutely.
notes. So it'll be quilterscandy.com/93. So if people want to go see photos of that. And then I'm curious, what platform do you use to sell your stuff?
I started off with Etsy because I felt like that was the easiest plug and go platform to figure out what I'm doing with. And then I moved on to, I do have my own website now on Shopify. And
Nice.
again,
I like Shopify a lot.
yeah, and that's where, again, I don't know without those resources if I would be sitting here doing what I'm doing, 15 years ago, because I'm not a programmer. I don't have web
Right.
design experience, and I needed that infrastructure to be in place in order for me to do what I'm doing.
Well, and now I'm thinking if I were to run a fabric shop, that one thing I like about Shopify that I'm sure other platforms have as well, and probably Etsy, but anyhow, if you buy a bolt and it comes with 15
Mm-hmm.
yards, okay, that'll have this many fat
Correct.
quarters. So you can go in and list exactly how many you
Right.
have. So you don't have to keep that inventory, keep track
I
of that,
do keep
right?
the inventory in a separate spreadsheet, and it is time consuming. And the reason is because, at least for now, Shopify and Etsy, I haven't found a plugin that works for me, where they'll talk to each other. I know they exist,
Gotcha.
but for the way that I do, so I have art gallery solids, for example, and I have X amount of this color, but that color is also being used in 2 other bundles. So how do you keep track of how many you really have available if you've sold 10 bundles and 6 yards, for example? I haven't found a plugin that can handle that kind of math yet.
I will say, if there are any
Right?
engineers who know how to make computer programs, there are some
There
holes
are.
out there that if I had the skills, I would totally develop these platforms. One is a membership platform, and then here's one. Like, please, if you have that skill set, talk to us. We have a program that will be hugely
It's just a matter of
successful.
time, right? Someone's going to figure this out. And I
Right.
do,
I wish it was
I've
me, but
tried
it's
some
not.
platforms some little plugins are getting close. They just they haven't quite pieced it out completely yet. But I bet you soon. It's coming soon.
I hope so.
Me
I
too.
so wish it was me. I wish I had that skill set. I just don't. So
I don't
someone
either.
will. Yeah. So, okay, you do still have your Etsy shop then?
I do. Etsy has its own universe, its own,
Yeah.
I mean, people are accustomed to shopping there, so I feel like I can't completely shut that off. And it's been a very solid revenue stream.
Good.
The the downside is I lose a little bit of control with that.
Right.
And the way things are listed I personally would find it more time consuming to shop there than to shop on a website or my website because of the way things are listed. And that's just Etsy driving the way it's listed.
Yeah.
But, with my website, I can have it listed the way I'd like, but I have to drive my own traffic to the
Well,
website.
and that's the thing, because people would have to know to go to you. I still
Correct.
go to Etsy from time to time if I'm looking for
For
something
sure.
because it's like the Google of finding
Right.
fabric or whatever. So,
Right.
yeah, I still go there. So I think that's smart. Have you ever had someone buy something and you've sold out of it
For
and you're
sure.
like, I mean, let's hear worst case scenario how that played out and best case scenario how that played out for you, real life.
Absolutely. It happens. And I feel horrible when it happens. Most of the time, people are very kind, and I try to look through my orders on a daily basis to see where I think that might happen. Where it happens the most often is when I'm having a sale, and it just goes faster than I can keep up with. And one of the things that I have started to do is I'm probably going to move away from selling yardage on Etsy and just put my bundles there.
Smart. That is smart.
And that way it'll be easier for me to see what's available. It's just one less thing to keep
Yep.
track of. And yeah, I offer them the refund right away. And everyone has been really kind and understanding, but I'm a
Good.
consumer
You haven't
too.
had anyone? Yeah, I know, right? You haven't had anyone be nasty?
Not around that.
Okay, what areas have you had the frustrated customer? We all have them,
We all
so.
have them. I mean, I think that the way that people get frustrated are people who may not really understand exactly what it is they're purchasing. And
Mm,
and 9 times out of 10, I can really count on one hand how many times I've had a customer where I was like, okay, that was really out of line. One of the funniest ones I had was I made a quilt kit with one of my strongest collaborators, which has been Susie Quilts. I made a quilt kit for her that
oh,
was
awesome.
probably one of my best selling quilts too, and it was just black and white. And one of the reviews I got was They gave me a 3 out of 5, which people probably think is okay. On Etsy, that actually dings you. Anything less than a 5 dings
Right.
you.
Which really sucks,
Right.
but
And that's why I
yes.
say you lose control of that. But they said it was 3 out of 5 because it's just black and white fabric. I'm like, well, you bought a
That was in the
2-color
listing.
quilt kit. Like, what did you do?
Yeah.
But,
Okay. So, well, at least if people read the reviews, they'll be like,
exactly.
you know what you're
Right.
buying
And
when you buy it,
I kind of laughed to myself, and I did reach out and, I'm sorry you're disappointed. What can I do to make it better? And she didn't respond. It's fine. But I would say it really, like, 99% of the people have been lovely. And I'm human, and I'm one
Right. They
person, and I
are.
absolutely make mistakes. And I own a mistake immediately and make it right. I go above and beyond to make it right, and people recognize that. So
Yep. And the good customers who you want to keep around recognize that. And the
they
other
do.
ones, you'd rather not have them,
I have a really
So,
high return customer rate too, which I'm so grateful for. So
well,
grateful
then you're
for.
doing something right. Okay, and we have to touch on this marketing strategy.
Yeah.
You making bundles for Susie Quilts. How did this happen? And then I want to talk about other marketing things that are working for you.
Okay. I have paid $0 for marketing. 0.
That's phenomenal. Good job. Okay, this is so cool. I'm so proud of you.
And social media is huge. Again, Instagram is the biggest feeder for me. I know other people have been more active with Facebook, and we can talk a little bit about that too, because it is two different demographics, I think.
Audiences. Yeah.
And that might have something to do with the responses that I'm getting from my customer base as well.
What do you mean by that?
I think that people who shop on Facebook, or who only use Facebook, tend to be older, and they may not be as comfortable buying online.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that correlation. You're right. Okay.
Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm not. I don't know.
No, you are. I would absolutely say that you're right. I mean, it's an older demographic who's only on
Who's
Facebook.
only on
Because
Facebook? Correct.
you and I are on
Correct.
Facebook, and the younger generation might not be.
My kids
But
definitely are not. They couldn't be
no,
less
mine either.
interested. Yeah.
Even Instagram.
I
My kids
know.
are like not on Instagram. That's like us and
Correct.
older.
I
My
know.
gosh, we're aging ourselves by
I
being on
know.
Instagram. So
The
anyhow, yeah,
Instagram
keep going.
crowd, particularly those that started quilting or really dug deep into quilting during COVID, are used to buying online. So the
Yep.
experience of, I mean, I understand as a customer too, you're looking at this bundle, you're just looking at pictures and then crossing your fingers you like it when you get it, right? I understand how, and quilting's not cheap. Fabric is not cheap. So that's quite an
Right,
investment to
right.
make when you can't see the thing and touch the thing and hold it in your hand before you walk away with it. So I do the best I can to have accurate descriptions and make my photographs as clear as possible. I'm not a photographer. That's something I would love to be able to have an assistant doing for me. So on the on the agenda for the future for
On the
hopefully
dream
this
list.
year. But I find that they're used to that experience, and so I don't have a lot of pushback from customers who are shopping through that stream. It's usually people who are more anxious about it to begin with, or who haven't purchased fabric. They're used to walking into a quilt shop or Joann Fabrics, or they've never purchased fabric before, who have a little more anxiety about purchasing.
Oh, I could see that. Now that's interesting. I feel very naive because even an older generation from myself, let's just say even the oldest who are still alive who are quilting, I guess I had just never thought, because, well, my mom's passed away, but even if she were around, she is not used to buying online. I hadn't thought of that. I had figured for sure, of course, they go to the fabric store, but also online. But no, my mom never bought fabric online. She would always go into a store and see it. I had not. I feel so naive for not even thinking about that.
And I mean, if you think about it too, my mother too, like, I think the world has just changed so fast. The online world has changed so fast relative to their experience with it, that Etsy is a good example. We're used to, you buy the thing on Amazon and it'll be here this
Right.
afternoon even, which is crazy.
Which I'm not sure has done us any favors as far as psychologically,
No,
but
No. And I think people who follow me on Instagram and who are Instagram feeds to my website, not Etsy, they know they're buying from me, a person, one
Yep.
person, not a big corporation. Etsy, I think it's a little more vague to people because I think they think of Etsy as an
Yep.
Amazon and they don't always understand they're interacting with individual people. They not Etsy is not sending you the thing. It's the person from Etsy that you're buying from. People who are not accustomed to making those purchases have more anxiety around it, which of course they would.
Right.
I get it.
Right. Well, and especially even just if you're a brand new quilter. My twin sister, made her
Right.
first quilt. It was very interesting to go through with her. What does a fat quarter mean? What all the
Absolutely.
different like, well, I want this fabric, where do I find it? But now I want this one to go with it. And just the whole
Right.
beginner experience. I was like, "Oh, it's very overwhelming when you're brand new."
It is very overwhelming. And I remember making my very first quilt. I actually pulled it out last week. I made it for my son when I was in that sewing class. And there's nothing about that quilt that I like
Don't get rid of
at
it.
all.
Don't get rid of it.
But I didn't know, I literally knew nothing about quilting other than I thought this would be something that I would like to learn. I knew nothing about fabric, how to pull color together. When I say like it's been an evolution and I know what I like now and I know how to put colors together. This was all, I remember walking into the quilt shop and she asked me what I wanted to make. And I'm like, well, I'm pregnant. I'd like to make a quilt for my baby. So she chose all primary colors and it's just very, the prints are very juvenile looking. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a baby quilt. That's not at all how my home would look or even what his baby room looked like at the time. So I just let her do her thing to help me. And I think, again, that's an evolution in the quilting industry too. Like I think the prints have changed, the
Oh
color
yeah.
aesthetics have changed and evolved with our generation and those who are younger than us too.
Well, and I designed for art gallery, but they were
Right.
my first love in fabric, and I think
Me
that
too.
was because I grew up with my mom, who had a very different aesthetic for me. And even when we went to the quilting shops, I'm like, they don't have anything. Going to Quilt Market in 2015 blew my mind. I was like, whoa, there's
it
cool
it does
stuff,
blow
you
your mind.
know, like they have
I'm
trendy.
still processing through what
Oh,
I saw
really?
there.
Okay, because you just went for the first
Yeah.
time. I'm
Yeah.
so glad to hear that. Okay, because I've heard, it's changed
Yeah.
over the years. It's not what it is. But for you, it was phenomenal.
I'm sure that's the case too, right? I'm sure I have nothing to compare it to because that was my first
I'm
one.
so happy to
But
hear
I am
that,
sure
that you
those,
loved it.
yeah, I'm sure that those people who had been doing this much longer than me can see how it's changed. And I went to my first quilt con last year too, and I had the sense that that also it was, COVID has had an impact. It was probably smaller. You probably had less people present and vendors present and things like that compared to what it had been in the past. But it still blew my mind.
Right.
It was still amazing.
Well, and I did go to,
So,
I've been now to two quilt cons. I really wish I could go this year, but I can't. So 2024, I'll be back. But I went to the one in, what is it, Austin? Right before right as COVID was like, what is this thing?
the one right before COVID,
Yeah,
yeah.
which was cool, but I went to the one last year too in Phoenix. I don't know, maybe I was just so like eyes wide, like, whoa, but it felt cool to me still. It feels very relevant, like very,
Very relevant. I walked for hours and hours and hours and looked at all of those quilts and I kept going back through the aisles because I would see something I hadn't
yeah.
noticed before, and I'm just
It
in awe of all the
feeds the
talent.
energy. I mean, I leave those shows with so many ideas and excitement. Like,
Yes,
and I keep hearing people like, is it going to keep, especially Quilt Market, is it going to happen still? Is it going to happen? I'm like, please, for the love, please don't let it die. Like, it is so huge to make you and me. Here we are. Like,
showing up. There's something to be said for just showing up.
yeah,
If I hadn't, if I hadn't met up with Jessica that day, I wouldn't have known that you were
that's right.
at Quilt Market. And yeah, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't
Yeah.
gotten in line to say hi. So
So I do want to go back though. How did you start? How did you ever team up with Susie Quilts?
yeah. Okay. So like I said, I had the Etsy store first. And And the very first collaborator, I'll back up a little bit. The very first collaborator that I reached out with someone who I just followed on Instagram, Brooke Schicklin from Edemonia Studios. I loved what she was doing, and I asked if she would be willing to do a collaboration. I wanted to put together a bundle for a pattern that she was releasing. And in hindsight, I'm like, how did I have that gall?
I love it. And I love it. I'm so glad you did. It takes that, so good
It does. And to her credit, why in the world? She said yes.
Well, I'll speak to that. As a quilt pattern designer, you'll take any publicity. So if you own a quilt shop, because you're the one taking the gamble, like
for sure,
you bought the fabric, like we're out nothing. You are simply marketing our pattern for us. So like, sure, we've got nothing to lose,
So she was really kind, very sweet. She curated a bundle out of the very limited selection I had at the time. And we did a little giveaway when her pattern released. And I went from like, I think I had maybe 5 Instagram followers. My mom was like included, right? Probably my husband, to, I don't know, maybe like 80 people out of that. And that felt huge to me at the time. And it's not about the number of followers. I'm the first person to tell you that. But when you're starting out, to go from 0 to something, right?
Right.
So she gave me that little leg up. I reached out to a few other people, and I was so pleasantly surprised at how many yeses I got. Probably for exactly what you're saying, right? They understand I'm holding the fabric. I am taking the gamble, so to speak.
Yeah, you're paying for it. Yeah.
But I found the quilting community, just to be so kind and welcoming and just willing to be collaborative. And I really appreciate that. So with Susie, I sent her an email. I actually sent her like 3 emails over the course of a couple of months. And I said to my husband, I'm like, all right, this is going to be the last one because I don't want to seem like I'm stalking her or torturing her.
Good lesson right here. You kept with it. And honestly, she probably wouldn't recognize if you were sending, I don't know. I mean,
well, so here's the thing. I had 0 or relative to her followers. But also I knew, because she's very public with her, well, I'm sure she picks and chooses what she wants to present, but I knew she was pregnant, and I can't remember if she had the baby or about to have a baby. I'm a mom. I know totally what that time in your life is like. And it was her second baby, which the jump from 1 to 2 is...
rocks your world.
Yeah, for sure. And I said to my husband, like, I'm sure she has other things on her mind. I'll just send her 1 more, and then I'm going to let it go. And around that time, I believe she had also hired, probably because she knew she needed help, right? A communications manager. Her name is Laura Hopper. And she responded to me and was so kind and so lovely. And she had seen some of the posts that I had done on Instagram for other bundles I was doing and said, I love what you're doing. I love your aesthetic, and we would love to work with you. I think
were you so
I
happy?
was like high for, I probably still am.
Yeah.
And it has been such a fun, rewarding collaboration. It's been great for the shop, but I thoroughly enjoy working. I work with Laura pretty closely when a new pattern is coming out. We put together a bundle to go with it, and it's so much fun.
That is so cool. So does she, when you work together, is it like you saying, here are some fabrics, and you kind of bounce ideas off, like, let's trade out this one and try that, or that kind of thing?
So she'll send me, they have a little pattern testing group. So the pattern goes out to the group of testers. And then if Laura wants to work with our shop, she'll reach out, or I've worked with other pattern testers in that group for Susie. And sometimes the testers are just open to anything that you have an inspiration for. Sometimes it's Laura would send me a picture of the black and white quilt, for example, or another. We did another sort of neutral quilt bundle, and she'll say, we want to make this. What do you have that we could work with? And we'll send pictures back and forth until we're happy with it. And then I send her the fabric. She makes it, and they take wonderful pictures.
Okay, so she'll make it. So do you ever like sell a bundle to the pattern testers so that someone will make it with your bundle?
Usually, if it's a collaboration I have with the pattern designer, then I will usually give a bundle for free to the tester to make it.
Okay. And so they will say, I want, like Susie, for example, would say, I want it made like this. And so it's Susie or
Sure.
Laura who's making it, not the testers.
I've
Is
had
that
done
right?
both. I've had Susie.
Okay.
I've had Susie or Laura make it. I've also had pattern testers make it. Either way, I'm giving them that bundle
Right. Yep.
because it's mutually beneficial.
Right.
They'll end up with lots of examples of potential for what this pattern can
Mm-hmm.
do. And I end up with beautiful pictures of a finished product, which always is more
Yep.
productive for me to post than just a picture of a fabric bundle.
I love this because this is marketing at its finest. And I've talked to this before. If you want to collaborate with someone, think of how it's a
Yeah,
win-win. How can you serve them?
right.
Because they're going to be serving you. So there's always a way to find. And people are like, I don't have many followers. I'm like, take work off someone's plate. Do something for them. There's always something you can
For
offer
sure.
that will be a
And I
benefit.
haven't forgotten what that's like. I mean, I now have it's still very modest following compared to what you would have or what Susie would have, but it's an engaged group that
Yeah.
is purchasing from me, which is wonderful. And I know I have more than maybe other people who are starting out. And I have worked with other pattern designers who are just getting started, and I love it. It's been wonderful to work with them and to. I'll offer the same thing for them. I give them the bundle and I get wonderful pictures in return.
You know what's kind of cool too is because of all the fabric that you have, I feel like you're in a position where you could take on someone who is a brand new pattern designer and has 10 followers
Absolutely.
because what are you out? Like
That's
that
right.
fabric you can sell elsewhere if it doesn't sell to their audience.
Sure.
So that's really attractive for a brand new pattern designer to reach out to someone who has a lot of fabric and who does collaborate with designers because you aren't hurt any by having it not sell well. You're still getting great pictures and it's still a win-win.
Absolutely. And it's fun.
See,
That's the fun
it
part.
is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen different designers? Obviously not names, but some have much more selling power than others.
I mean, there's definitely a correlation between the pseudo celebrity quilters out there. If they are posting something that you've collaborated with, it sells more. It's reaching a
Mm-hmm.
larger audience. But I've also done bundles for people who don't have as large of number of followers, or they're just getting started. That's done very, very well. It's sometimes hard to
Awesome.
tell what will be the hit.
Hmm.
Sometimes I just know too.
Really? How so?
Well, I know I you have an instinct, I guess. I saw when I saw the pattern. This would be not this past year, but the year before. I think Susie did a pattern called Holiday Party, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's going to be really popular. It was just really sweet. It's accessible. It was nice for beginner quilters, which I think even more experienced quilters like those easier patterns. I do because
Yeah.
I like the instant
Yes.
gratification.
Right? I mean, we look at those complicated ones and it's like, oh, I'd love to have that, but we need a quick finish
So you just need
sometimes
it,
that's
right?
rewarding and
You need
beautiful.
it to keep your mojo going for sewing, right? Your sojo.
Yes, because if every quilt takes a year, like,
Right,
nah, you can't do that.
right.
Well, and I am thinking too, I remember I had a pattern come out that I thought would be really popular and it wasn't. I'm not even gonna say the title because some people have bought it and I'm like, oh, thank you for buying that one. But and I don't want to detract anyone from buying it. But I reached out to a fabric shop who I love, who I feel like is fairly successful, and I asked for them if they'd be interested in putting together a bundle, and they did. And I know it didn't sell well. I just know it. And it was very humiliating on my end. And so sometimes you may want to reach out to someone who has a bigger audience, but it doesn't always mean that it's going to sell well.
That's very true.
And sometimes the patterns that I think, like my Better Together, I talk about that a lot. It's so simple. It's
Oh
my
yeah.
bestseller. Like those bundles, people who put together bundles for that, it's like boom, 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 boom. It sells. And there is a bit of a gamble of what's going to work and what's not. Have you ever put together something where you're like, oh, this will for sure be a hit, and it wasn't?
Yeah, that's definitely happened. So starting out, I started off with solids only, because solids, I know there's always going to be a market for solids. And then I started to dip into the patterns. Well, when you start, I think the first person or the first a company I got a wholesale group with was Checker. So if you go onto the Checkers website and start looking at patterns, your brain will explode. Like, I don't even know where to
Yes.
start with how to narrow this down. I can only have so much space. And I'm not trying to conquer the sewing world in that regard. I can't hold everything, obviously. So I did work fairly closely with my rep and told her what I personally like. And she was invaluable to saying, okay, I think you should start off with these three. Look at what they're doing. Look at these three manufacturers and what they're doing and see if there's something from there that you would draw from. And eventually I ended up getting a contract too with Art Gallery. And Art Gallery I like everything practically that they come out with. So it's hard because I can't carry everything, but I do love so much of what they
Right.
have. And I found that when I do that, when I stick with what I personally like, I don't have a hard time selling it. Anytime that I've been tempted to make the decision of, well, it's not what I would quilt with, but I bet you that will be popular. I have learned the hard way that I have a harder time selling it. And I don't know if it's because I don't think it's personal to my aesthetic. It could just be because I love it. I have a more genuine ability to show my excitement for it. And I can say, like, I think twice I've made those like, oh, I don't know if I should have chosen that. But so for the most part, if I'm putting it out into the world, I believe in it.
And I also wonder too, because you're attracting an audience who's attracted to the things that you're attracted to. And so then if you put something out that's not true to that, it's a little different. They're probably like, "Oh," because they like what you've been putting out. I am curious, how did it differ, those things that you thought, "Well, let's try that." Was it the color? Was it the prints, the
That
mixture?
didn't sell so well.
Yeah. Or how was it different from your go-to look?
Okay, so I'll be honest in that for the first time this year, I carried a Halloween print. I probably won't do that
Mhm.
again. I probably won't carry Halloween because I got it because I thought it was really, really cute. And they glow in the dark. And I thought, oh, that'd be such cute little trick or treat bags. And now the reality is, if I'd had the time to make trick or treat bags and show that, I'm sure it would have done better. But I don't. I don't have the time right now, and
Right.
I need to do that. So it didn't sell as great as I would have liked for it to, but it's also really specific. I mean, when I think about quilting,
Mhm.
I personally don't make a Halloween specific quilt.
True.
So other holiday, like a Christmas quilt, I think there's probably more people who are making Christmas quilts, but so
Yep.
I got taken by the adorableness of these prints.
Yep. They did a good job marketing.
And that's okay. It did sell and it has sold and it's fine. But yeah, so lesson learned. And
Yep.
I have to say I've been pretty lucky. I'm like looking around. There's really nothing in this space that I don't personally genuinely love. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
moment to come downstairs in the morning and walk into this room. I do smile like I get to do this. This is pretty
I
awesome.
love it. Well, and I do want to ask too, because I know a lot of people who opened up shops during COVID, fabric shops, are now closing, and I heard this talk of like sales are down. Have you seen this? How are you doing with that?
I can appreciate why that might be the case for a lot of people. And I have to say, one of the reasons I think I'm still here, this is literally my full-time job. It is all I do. And it's not that if you're doing this as a side hustle that you can't be successful, but I think it is extremely time consuming. And
Yes.
the scale of what you're putting out into the world, if you're also, have another full-time job, it has to be on a smaller scale. So that might not feel as worth it for someone, perhaps. I haven't seen a dip in sales. One of the
That's good to
biggest things
hear.
that I've done was these advent calendar boxes. It's a fat quarter, like you have a little packet with a fat quarter in it, so you open a different packet each day. I did them. This was my second
Oh,
holiday,
how cute.
second Christmas doing them. And I do them not just for Christmas. You can have them I do have one that's a 31-day box. You can open one all through December and count down for the new year. They're extremely time consuming, I have to say, to put together. Um,
Yeah.
so I did really well with that the first year, and I wasn't sure how that would go this year because they are expensive. And it's a purchase that you're probably purchasing for yourself versus fabric that you're making for a quilt that you might gift to someone. And I wasn't sure what that would look like with the holidays this year, and it was fine. It was a slight increase from the year before, and I said if it's stable, I'll compile that as a win. So it was a
Nice.
slight increase.
That's cool. I have actually not heard of, I've heard Advent whatever, but I didn't know what that looked like. So I think that's a really fun idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we love that adrenaline of a surprise. And if you can, find something that I know I love fabric, but I want that element of a surprise, a
Right.
thrill. So treat yourself. And I like that.
I know I know I'm not the only one out there doing it. There's other people doing it. I do have to look next year at how to manage that piece because they do come together at the busiest time of the year, and they are very time consuming to put together. So, yeah.
So yeah, evaluating that one.
Hmm.
And so yeah, business has been steady for you. You haven't seen a decline with
I haven't. So I feel
That's
really,
awesome.
again, really fortunate with that too. And it's a lot of return customers.
Well, that says a lot too. Now, you mentioned you have one, you're going to go get your child from school, a 15-year-old son. How many kids do you have? How old are they? Because that plays into, how you can work.
It absolutely does. I'm glad you actually mentioned that because I think for me, it was the right moment for me personally to do this for a variety of different reasons. And the stage I am in my life definitely is part of it. My daughter just turned 14 and my son's 15.
Yeah.
So I like very much still picking them up at school and being here when they're home from school. But they're also, I'm not making after school snacks,
Yep.
and I'm not certainly not in the diaper stage and
Right.
all of that. They're not, teenagers have their own challenges for sure.
My kids are about the same ages,
Um,
so yes, I feel this deeply.
yeah. But that hands-on mommy thing is not as relevant to me right now. So,
Well, and, like I started my business when my youngest went into kindergarten. And
hmm,
so I can't speak to someone starting a business with young children at home. I just know for
right.
me, I don't know that that would have worked. So I don't want to discourage anyone. I just don't know what that would look like. I just know that the timing worked out really well for me in my situation. So it does, those are things to take into consideration is the
Yeah.
time that
I
you have.
I had a career change when my daughter went to kindergarten. That's when I switched to international education. And I partially did that because, for the most part, starting off, I was working while they were also at school, and that was wonderful. But in terms of what I'm doing now, I don't think I would have been able to manage that with kids running around.
Right.
I
Yeah.
personally couldn't have.
Right. Because some people
Some
can, we all
people
handle
can.
things different. But yeah,
Well, this
yep.
this space that I'm in right now was at one point filled with their toys too. So there's that.
Right.
I don't
Oh,
even know
hearing
where I
that
would
gives
have
me a
put
bit
it.
of nostalgia.
Yeah. I don't know where I would
I
have
love
put
it.
fabric. I didn't have any space to put fabric because this was their space.
Right.
um, yeah, I looked around when COVID hit and I was already thinking, you know what? It's my turn to have this room.
Yep. I love it. So, yeah, for our listeners who want to check out your shop and take a look, where can they find you?
So the Etsy shop is Global Fiber Shop. The website is also globalfibershop.com, and my Instagram is global_fiber.
Awesome. Well, yay. Okay. Everyone go check it out. Check out the fabric bundles that you do. And thank you so much for being here. This was super fun. I enjoyed chatting. Very
Oh,
insightful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Laura, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was such a pleasure chatting. It's really neat to hear how you have had success and how you're very savvy with your marketing. I love it. And I know our listeners loved hearing from you and learning from you. Just such a pleasure. If you have not already, please leave a review for the Craft to Career podcast. Let me know what you think of the podcast, if you're liking the show, how it's helping you with your business. And next Friday, I'll be back with a brand new episode. I have Stacy Tuschel. She is actually a mentor. I'm in her mastermind this year. She is amazing. She runs one brick and mortar and one online shop. Both are seven figures, very successful. And she helps business owners. It's called well-oiled operations. She helps business owners run their business like a well-oiled operation. And so I can't wait to introduce you to Stacy next week and to let you learn what you can from her, from my mentor and my mastermind guru. So join me next Friday when meeting Stacy Tuschel. Until then, have a wonderful week.